Good morning, everyone. Before we start our presentation, I would like to introduce myself and my co-members. We are the Group 3 and assigned to discuss the intellectual revolution that defines society.
But before we start, here is the intended learning outcomes.
At the end of the lesson, you should be able to identify the intellectual revolution that shaped society across time. Explain on how intellectual revolution transformed the views of society about dominant scientific thoughts, and research on other intellectual revolution that advanced modern science and scientific thinking.
So, what is intellectual revolution?
The term intellectual revolution is used to refer to Greek speculation about the nature in the period before Socrates. Hence, the alternative technical terms are presocratic or non-theological or first philosophy. Bear in mind that the philosophy in question has little to do with ethics and much more to do with what we call physics or logic.
And now we're gonna talk about Copernican Revolution by Nicholas Copernicus. In the early days, people questioned what created days and night. Some of you might answer God, but religion is not the case here. A famous philosopher and astronomer, Claudius Ptolemy, states that the moon, the planets, the sun, and all the stars rotates around the earth with a uniform circular motion. He believes that the earth was the center of the solar system, known as geocentric. Ptolemy argued that since all bodies fall to the center of the universe, the earth must be fixed there at the center. Otherwise, falling objects would not be seen to drop toward the center of the earth. Ptolemy was able to demonstrate, however, that no contrary observations had ever been obtained.
As a result of such arguments, the geocentric system became dogmatically asserted in Western Christendom until the 15th century, when it was supplanted by the heliocentric or sun-centered system of Nicholas Copernicus, a Polish astronomer. According to him, the Earth is at rest in the center with the rest of the planets, revolving around the sun. Copernicus was the first to succeed in describing the movements of the planets using an astronomical theory which placed the sun at the center. Although it makes sense now, during those times it was judged to be heretic and therefore it was an acceptable idea to be a Catholics.
Next, Freudian Revolution by Sigmund Freud.
According to Sigmund Freud, human personality is a complex and has more than single component. In his famous psychoanalytic theory, he explained that there are many conscious and unconscious factors that can affect or influence our behaviors and emotions. He also states that personality is composed of three elements known as the id, the ego, and the superego. These elements work together to create complex human behaviors.
So what is id? This aspect of personality is entirely unconscious and includes instinctive and primitive behaviors, while superego holds the internalized moral standards and ideals that we acquire from our parents and society. And the last is ego. Sigmund Freud originally used the term of ego to refer to a sense of self. It is the components of personality that is responsible for dealing with reality.
Here's example of each key parts of personality.
If your IG says,
I want it right now.
and your superego replies,
You can't have it. It's not the right time.
but your ego, or reality principle, balances the ID and the superego. So, your ego says,
If you really want something, you need to do a bit of planning and work hard for it.
Let's move on to the last, Darwinian Revolution by Charles Darwin.
Who is Charles Robert Darwin? Charles Robert Darwin, or aka Charles Darwin, is a geologist, biologist, and English naturalist. Charles Darwin, born on February 12, 1809, and died on April 19, 1889, at the age of 73.
what is Darwinian Revolution? The Darwinian Revolution remains an acceptable phrase to describe the change in thought brought by the theory of evolution, provided that the revolution is seen as occurring over an extended period of time. Charles Darwin's theory of evolution states that all species of organisms arise and develop through the natural selections of small inherited variations that increase the individual's ability to compete, survive, and reproduce.
There are four factors of natural selection, which is WASH. V stands for variation, O overproduction, S survival of the fittest, and H for heredity. Variation. Those organisms with heritable traits better suited to the environment will reach maturity and survive. As an example of this would be moths of same species with different color wings. Moths with wings similar to the color of the tree bark are better able to camouflage themselves than moths of a different color. As a result, the three-colored moths are more likely to survive, reproduce, and pass on their gene. Overproduction. All species will produce more offspring than will survive to adulthood. Example, many of species of fish lay millions of eggs at one time, though only a fraction those survive. Survival of the fittest. This means that individuals in a population or community are more likely to survive if they are fit in a genetic sense. Every organism is slightly different to every other, even those of the same species. Heredity. Changes in the organism brought by the environment feel inherited by their offspring. Examples, the height of an organism, its weight, the color of its coat, and so on.
Our presentation will end here. Thank you for listening. Anyway, do you have any questions for us?